Okay, so we're gonna get a few facts out of the way. I am a college graduate. I graduated with 2 degrees. The last 7 weeks of my college career were spent online, and yet I was still able to move somewhere with a job in my field. I really don't want that to sound like bragging. I more or less want it to sound like overcoming adversity at university. And while this video might be dated in, say, a year, maybe even 6 months, I think it's important that we decompress our experiences throughout COVID-19 and how it affected those in college, in a university setting. I think that's very important. But today we are going to focus on the university higher education aspect of how this has all affected our lives. And I also want to note that my situation is one of thousands of situations that people have been put in over the course of this 2.5 months, or whenever this video comes out. And I think it would be best to go chronologically, starting in January 2020. I was in a production of Much Ado About Nothing at my college, and all throughout the rehearsal process, we kept reading things on the news about this virus, this disease that was slowly inching its way across China. We would read updates on Reddit posts or the odd news article every once in a while, and we'd be like, oh, that kind of sucks for over there. Hopefully they can contain it. And then Kobe dies. Unrelated. And we kind of move on, all the while this COVID-19 keeps getting more and more press coverage. Fast forward to February when China begins their lockdown, and various countries around China or people who have visited China and went back to their home country or traveled or what have you. The virus is spreading more so throughout the world. People are kind of starting to panic. Countries are starting to go on lockdown, specifically Italy. And then spring break happens. This happens in the middle of March. We're rehearsing for a show. And towards the beginning of spring break, we get this email from our university telling us that anybody who lives in a dorm, unless otherwise specified, unless you went and talked to them, they will have to move their stuff out and live with their parents because classes will be going online. It was a soft online. People who lived far away or weren't able to get their stuff out in time would still be able to live in the dorms at this time, but still classes would be online from the safety of your home or the professor's home. And professors did have the option to do their classes online or just have it all uploaded through Canvas or Blackboard. Blackboard even a thing anymore? And right before spring break ended, our university gave us this email saying that all students had to be out of the dormitories. If you lived on campus or in any campus facility on site, you'd have to move your stuff out. And they did that probably within 2 or 3 days after the initial email saying that you could live there if you wanted. My friends and I didn't live on campus or in a university facility this year. So even though we weren't really affected by it, I was still kind of mad for the people who were, because that is such a quick turnaround. And of course, they had people talk to them about, oh, I can't get my stuff out, or I'm not going to be able to move in time for this deadline. So exceptions were made, but you had to talk to the university about it. They didn't advertise it in this email that they sent. So now classes go online. I only had 2 online Zoom classes throughout this semester, but they were definitely very interesting in terms of how they were run, A, and B, how it kind of affected the class, whether for better or for worse. I graduated with a degree in theater arts and English, and none of my English classes were online. Only my theater classes were. It is hard to do an acting class via Zoom. Part of the charm for doing an acting class in person is that you can get feedback right away, or the professor is able to see your body language better, but like through a screen, it's kind of hard to tell unless you have a high resolution camera or if you're really close to the screen and your director or professor can tell what's going on. And it kind of takes the pressure off having to memorize things because you can have it just on this side of the camera and you can look at it and just make it kind of look like you're looking at the camera. Assignments also went down from learning less monologues and scenes to more paper-based projects, slides, just short little papers. My playwriting class wasn't really all that affected because it's more writing and then sharing over Zoom, so you could still assign people to read the different parts. It just, the timing was a little off given the on-screen format, and you don't know what speed people's Wi-Fi is at. I was also working on 2 senior theses at this time, and for my English degree thesis, I was working with a creative writing professor over once a week Zoom meetings. And so I would just have to find time during the week to work on my thesis. My other thesis, my theater thesis professor, was not Zooming at this point in time, so I would just have to send him updates on drafts and whatnot. But thankfully, our full drafts were due before the whole quarantine happened, so we were able to just adapt those into presentations. I also lost my job as a result of COVID-19. I was working at a movie theater, Marcus Theaters, and my last day was in the middle of March. I don't specifically remember which day, but I had been called off because people were scared of this virus 2 days in a row when I was supposed to work, and then I was informed that we would be shutting our doors for the time being. I did not know how I was going to pay rent for April or May, because at that point in time, the only thing I could do was file for unemployment, and that would have taken 6 to 7 weeks to process, if you could even get on the Nebraska unemployment website, because so many people were crowding it. I was finally only able to get on it about 2 weeks ago, and I hope I get something back. I think that'd be really nice. Personally, I didn't take as much of a financial toll because of this quarantine as other people did. I didn't really go out and spend money except if it was on groceries or entertainment, stuff like that. But that meant venturing out. I did try to do at least one adventure out every day during quarantine, whether that was going to the store with my mask on or just walking around the mile square that we had around our house. Just something to keep my brain active and working. One of my roommates and I also started an at-home workout routine that we did about 3 days a week, so that was nice to also keep the weight off. All 5 roommates were home now, so we spent a little bit more on water because our dishes were always being full, because with 5 people, there's a lot of dishes to do. We also did a few other fun things. We made the Cycle short film over the course of COVID, and we also filmed a few other video projects just for fun to fill class requirements and whatnot. So we did have our share of fun. Our landlord chose not to reduce our amount of rent due to COVID, so we would have to pay rent in full. I thought I was going to have to ask my parents to help me pay for the months of April and June until I checked my bank account and found that I had gotten a stimulus check because my parents did not claim me on their taxes this year. And you best bet that I put half of that away into a savings account so I would not be tempted to spend it. Throughout all the video projects and the Zooming and the theses and whatnot, I found it really tough to find any kind of motivation to get up in a timely manner or do anything creative. One of my friends started an ink quarantine thing where we would just draw different sketches every day. Oh, that one gets to go that way. We would just draw different sketches every day, and so that was nice to just keep blood pumping. But otherwise, this was a little bit harsher than the typical senioritis that most seniors feel. It just felt like the world was ending. Like, what do you do? What do you do to prepare yourself for the real world when everything is crumbling around you and people are making it seem like the apocalypse is nigh? We played a lot of board games. We tried out a new game called Horrified, which I think I'm going to go through in another video because it really does deserve some special love and a little more attention. But thankfully, the CARES Act allotted our university about $750,000, I think, to give to students who were financially affected by COVID-19. People who lived in the dorms were given $500 automatically. That was phase one. And then phase two, you had to total up the amount of financial burden you had experienced throughout the entire quarantine, report it, and then send that to them in a report, and they would give you money back, which we will be getting back sometime this week. It did take about 3 weeks to process, but that's more money coming in than we had in the 2.5 months during quarantine. So things were looking up. We were able to pay April and May rent. I was too, without having to consult my parents for any money. And I know my parents love me. They do a lot for me, but there's just like a sense of pride in having paid for rent from your own money for an entire year by yourself, making those adult purchases and decisions by yourself. But my parents told me not to be too proud, not to accept mom and dad's help. And throughout my move from Lincoln to Kansas City, I have experienced a lot of help from them. We did not have an online graduation ceremony. Our university decided to postpone the date to an in-person date in August, and if things aren't cleared out by August, it'll happen in October. But before they announced that, they had told us that the ceremony was canceled. Then they said postponed, but they only said that replying to a comment that somebody put on an Instagram post of theirs. They never announced it officially until about 2 or 3 weeks later. Needless to say, our university's social media and PR and HR was all over the place throughout this entire ordeal. If you wanted money back or if you needed to talk to somebody, they didn't put those at the bottom of emails saying, if you have any exceptions, email blank or call blank. That was something you had to do on your own and figure out. I think they did kind of handle it poorly, but at least I got out of it. I don't know what they're going to do for the following semester, but through what I've read online, I think some universities are going to continue with online classes for at least the fall semester, which might be better than having this last half of the semester online, because at least now you can build the class around the format. But hopefully now, if schools give them enough time to prep and prepare, they'll be able to tune the class to the format and everything will be at least hopefully better. I know college is a very social place, a very social time in people's lives, and they want to see their friends, but concessions have to be made if we want to eradicate this thing. I moved down to Kansas City right after their stay-at-home order was lifted, so I was able to move here with no problem. But as of the recording of this video, there has been no official stay-at-home warning from Pete Ricketts in Nebraska. So, proud to be a Cornhusker. Even though Lincoln and Grand Island are up there in terms of hotspots for COVID-19. It's all just very disheartening. However, life does go on. I have a job at the Coterie Theater in Kansas City teaching theater to children, as well as another job, I think, at Target. So life is rebuilding, at least down here. And I think it will everywhere if we just, for the love of God, stay home or be safe about going out. I think this will be eventually a funny story that we can tell people, our children or our children's children, when they ask what was the most catastrophic or significant event in our lifetime. We could say COVID-19, where we all had to stay in and toilet paper was scarce. It's just a very interesting walk on eggshells type of situation right now, but I think we should have hope that life will rebuild, life will go on, theater will come back, and we'll all be able to hug our friends without being 6 feet apart. This is Dustin signing off, but only for now.